Good afternoon. 3:02 p.m. Good to see y'all. Thanks for coming. I do see a few faces on the screen. And don't worry, if you're feeling zoomed out, you can keep your camera off. No worries. Welcome. I'm Lashana, part of this beautiful team of folks here today. And I just want to welcome you. So take a breath. You may be coming in on 2 Zoom wheels, right? A lot going on. Busy time of the year. Maybe we're leaning in the fall. Earlier today, I was on a call and somebody said it's false fall. It was pretty hot today, right? Yeah, but we're getting there. We're getting there. So welcome. Want to just take a moment to honor the land that I'm on. I'm here in Burlington in Alamance County. And we'll just take a moment to honor the Okanichiban Saponi Nation, my siblings and friends and cousins and aunties and uncles and all those with that deep wisdom. Also want to remind us that we are on stolen land, on land that was occupied by Native folks, and through all kinds of worldwide colonization, but also certainly colonization here on this land. There's genocide and struggle and stress. And so we want to make sure we take a minute, understand the depth of that, and honor our siblings. In the chat, we just want to know who's here with us today. In the chat, if you can just engage with me for a moment, tell us who you are. So drop your name, your organization, where you're calling from. Drop your name, organization, where you're calling from. Hey there, Ed. Good to see you in the space. Awesome, Michelle, good to see you. Thank y'all for coming. Kenya, Aaron, appreciate y'all. Hopefully you're seeing some names in the chat that you're familiar with, but if there's someone there that you don't know, maybe connect with them as well. Adrian, Pepper, good to see y'all. Go ahead to the next slide. Again, I'm Lashana. I'm with the Community Food Strategies team here with Jared Cates and Susie and Miles. I know I'll mess up your last name, Susie, so I ain't even trying. So, you know what I'm saying? Ain't no need to even go there. But you see the rest of our team on the screen. You'll hear from us today. So glad you're here. We work with food councils all over North Carolina. Next slide. And work with some of you intimately with the work that we do with food councils all over North Carolina. And so certainly we come to this work, you know, standing alongside plenty other brilliant, beautiful people in food systems work, in community who are also doing this work as well. So we're not the only ones here, right? We have to also honor those who are doing work in community with people around food, digging deep, uncovering all of these racist and hard systems that we're trying to dismantle and trying to do this beautiful work with our community members. So appreciate you being here. Also, I would like to say that we are recording, so there will be a recording of this after our gathering today. I think my time is up. I'm gonna pass it over to Susie to get us started with our time today.
Thank you, Lashana, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to talk about this project and hear, questions from you all. Before we get into that, I just wanted to provide a really brief overview about the American Rescue Plan, given that, this project is really based in the American Rescue Plan and really leveraging the opportunity that it presents for advocates like yourselves in community. Before I get started, I'm Susie Ketchaturian. I'm a senior policy analyst at the North Carolina Budget and Tech Center. And so as you see in this slide, the American Rescue Plan was passed in March of last year, 2021, and was really the largest in terms of dollars, but also just the most expansive of the COVID relief packages that were passed by Congress. As part of it, it included $350 billion total for state, local, territorial, and tribal governments. These are technically called the fiscal recovery funds. And so in addition to the fiscal recovery funds, there were also dozens of other more issue-specific funding, like public education, funding for COVID testing, treatment, rental assistance, and much more. If you can go to the next slide, Miles. As I mentioned, there were a lot of different issue area buckets that the American Rescue Plan included funds for. So of the funding coming to North Carolina, here's the breakdown by kind of issue area bucket. And so as I mentioned, the fiscal recovery fund, this green bar here, that was a really substantial amount of funds. So the total coming for all of the governments in North Carolina, right? So that's state, county, city, and town governments, that totals $8.9 billion. And then if you continue on to the next slide, when we look at when we zoom in a little bit closer and see sort of where these funding streams are going in terms of which kinds of governments, I like this graphic on the right from the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office. So you can see that in the top left, 5.4 billion went to the state government, and that's what the North Carolina General Assembly has the authority to appropriate, and that's actually all been initially allocated. On the top right, you see that all 100 counties in North Carolina are getting about $2 billion total. On the bottom right, you see that what are called non-entitlement units. These are smaller towns and villages with populations of less than 50,000 people. They're receiving a combined 700 million. And then finally on the bottom left, you see that the largest 26 cities in North Carolina are getting about 670 million. And so to be clear, each specific county and municipality have their own initial allocation, and also I'll show you some examples in a moment. But this is sort of where funds are going by type of local government. So as I mentioned before, these funds are, I like to describe them broadly as sort of flexible funds. And you can see here on the left-hand side, these are the 4 eligible use categories that the funds must fall into. They're pretty broad. These were set out by the US Department of Treasury, and they're actually responsible for overseeing all the funds. So especially the second bucket around supporting the COVID-19 public health and economic response, the US Treasury in January clarified that this includes projects that target support to households or communities with low incomes, and this makes it a little bit easier for those governments to actually make those allocations. And I won't go into detail about it today because it would take a lot more time. But this, the first bullet point that you see here about revenue loss, it has posed some challenges, as local governments can now spend up to $10 million of their funds on broad kind of government services. But we have plenty of guidance to support folks who are working in communities such as yourselves. So it's definitely not, it's not all lost, even if your local government has already or is considering that decision. Here on the next slide, as I mentioned sort of like broadly the different kinds of funds or the different amounts of funds that are going to different types of governments. This is just a very small sample of some specific allocations that governments are getting. As I said, there's more than 600 local governments in North Carolina that are each getting their own pot of funds. And so this is just a very, very small list, a quite random list that I pulled just to kind of give you a sense of what scale we're talking about. So especially given the size of local government budgets, this is a really incredible opportunity. It's a really large influx of funds. And so the advocacy opportunity is really important and really exciting. So on the next slide, and this is my final slide, Miles is going to get to talk to you in a few minutes about the timeline for this project, but I also wanted to show you the timeline that's set out by the federal government and in the American Rescue Plan itself. So it's already been about 1.5 years since this, since the legislation became law, but there's still a long way to go, which means that there's really ample opportunity to engage with your local government in the process and in the decision making. So governments in North Carolina have received their funds in 2 equal halves. So they got the first half last summer, 2021, and then they just recently got the second half of their funds. You see here on step 9 that all governments have until December 31st, 2024 to make decisions about what to spend their funds on. And then they have 2 years after that to actually spend down the funds. The one caveat to these timelines is, and this is as of July of this year, the one exception is for loans that will increase the supply of affordable housing, since, you know, building housing and really building infrastructure in general can take a lot of time. So they've made that change in the guidance. I also want to note that while decisions need to be made by the end of 24, we've already been seeing local governments changing the decisions that they've already made. So even once they've made initial decisions, that does not by any means mean that their process is over. So hopefully that provides you a little bit of an overview about what it is we're talking about when we talk about the American Rescue Plan. I'm happy to provide a whole lot more detail on that in separate conversations or as we move forward with this project. But I will now turn it over to Jared to talk about some examples of how these funds are being used to support local food systems in North Carolina.
Thank you, Susie. And I see some questions starting to come in the chat, and we will definitely get to all those questions at the end. We promise to wrap up in the next 15 minutes and save half an hour for questions. So we will get your question rolling here soon. My name is Jared Cates, also going as Jalen. I'm using all pronouns, and really appreciate the information that Susie just shared with us, because it's very important background to the work that we are trying to do to support communities in accessing these allocations. Community Strategies also worked last year with North Carolina Association of County Commissioners and their Food Resilience Task Force that put out several resources around food system resilience last year, including one document that was resources for municipalities and counties on how they can use their ARPA local recovery funds to invest in food system resilience. So really encourage you to check out that resource that I think was dropped in the chat, and to interact with NCACC as an ally in this work, because they want to support municipalities in understanding how they can use this funding to support food system resiliency. We heard what the allowances that it could be used for. A lot of this kind of food system health equity allowance is around specific food assistance and helping with the negative economic impacts. This can be interpreted in many different ways to support community food system resiliency and its ability to serve and be an emergency food supplier. So you can get creative in the ways that you think about how to create emergency food resiliency in these projects. And there are examples starting to come out that we'll share a couple of that you can reference to folks who may be nervous about certain projects fitting under these the qualifications for what this funding can be used for. Let's get that next slide though, please. So these are in that document that was dropped in. The association lists several ways that this money could be used to invest in community food system resiliency. You could use it for local grants to support farms, fisheries, producers, other food businesses, supporting infrastructure or program needs. You could support community gardens, job skills training, public land to support community gardens, resources through personnel capacities to support community gardens and education, processing and distribution. Small farms and other producers really need these processing and aggregation hubs and access to storage. So if you want to create food system resiliency, processing and distribution is a wonderful way that you could use ARPA funding to support that. And then community food assessments. Many food councils that we work with in the network and other groups across North Carolina have engaged in community food assessment processes. It's a wonderful way to identify, the resources you have in your food system, your gaps, to aggregate existing data, to interview people and identify new data, to really see where investment is needed to be able to create an equitable and resilient community food system. Let's go to that next slide, please. Emergency food system support is obviously what makes sense for this funding, supporting food banks and food pantries and the partner agencies and those aggregators to be able to provide fresh, healthy food is a wonderful way to think about using this money. Education. One example we're about to show is an example Cooperative Extension was given funding to support their education in community activities. Public transportation, you could think about innovative ways that public transportation can be used to create more equitable access to food resources for residents. And then direct cash assistance, working with businesses and nonprofits that provide food assistance for families in need experiencing disproportionate economic impact. So these are just some examples that NCACC has outlined. There are several other resources that we'll be sharing with participants in this cohort, and we are going to be working to identify other case study examples that outline how all of these are being funded through allocations across the country in different municipalities. Let's go on to that next slide. So these are just a few examples we wanted to hit on. Guilford County recently, this was the example I was just speaking about. They allocated $885,000 to Cooperative Extension to support their work and bringing people together, capacity building, networking folks in Guilford County. So that's going to really support their food security efforts. In Mills River, there's a farmers market that was had a SNAP Level Up program that was operating and being a strong benefit to their SNAP recipients. And now the town of Mills River is using some of their ARPA funds to support that that program. A couple of examples from outside of North Carolina. Phoenix, Arizona, a large municipality. They had a lot of funding. They made a giant investment, $9.7 million across multiple programs in their first year, really building on some work that city had done to create a 2025 Phoenix Food Action Plan. So they were kind of building on work that had already been done and investing in 10 programs with all that money going to a multitude of things. So that's a really strong example of a large municipality putting a lot of money towards food system resiliency. And then Jefferson County, Colorado, this was an example of a grant program where they put $1.7 million towards a Jefferson County food system grant program. And they're going to be they'll have folks apply up to $300,000 grants to support food system resilience projects. So those are just 4 quick examples. We have heard lots of questions over the past year of what is allowable from both food councils and from local government. Community Food Strategies worked with UNC School of Government, North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office to host a webinar last year about ARPA local funds and how they could be used for food system resiliency. So we'll share that webinar link out with some of the follow-up. But we continue to hear how there's confusion, today. So that's why we're very excited to bring on Susie as a team member with Community Food Strategies and partner with the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. I'm going to hand it over to Miles to explain more about this project and really what we're trying to do through this Advocacy Academy.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Glad to see everybody. Miles Kirksey, North Carolina Rural Center. So yeah, I'm really here to present on what this program is, how you guys can engage. If it's not you that's engaging with the program, maybe there are others in your network that you think of that could be logical partners for some of this work. So the program that we're launching today is the ARPA Advocacy Academy. This is going to be a 2-year-long program, 22 months here, with the objective of supporting local food councils or community groups being a broad term that we'll expound on later, in advocating for local government allocations of those ARPA dollars that Susie mentioned. As she mentioned, there's still a lot of unspoken $4 that are left on the table. Jared elaborated on what some of those uses are. So we think there is some good flexibility in getting some of this money, some of these allocations down into the food systems work that you guys are already doing in your community. So what it is, again, 22 months long. We're looking to identify 9 food councils or 9 community groups that are going to come together. It could be a combination of food councils, community groups, nonprofits, etc. We're going to connect virtually and in person to learn more about the local budget process in your communities, do effective advocacy with your local governments, whether it's at a local municipal level or at a county level. And we're going to do some hand-in-hand coaching, some individual coaching with these groups around some advocacy campaign strategies and effective tactics to get these allocations down to the projects that you guys are already working on. So at the bottom, you see some of the different ways we'll engage in this project: advocacy, leadership development, capacity building. We do hope to build the capacity of your advocacy capabilities as food councils, community groups, some coaching and support one-on-one and as a cohort. So we'll convene these 9 groups together, learn from one another in this 2-year process. We'll provide plenty of campaign support when it comes to advocating your local and county elected officials. And then we'll set you forth to engage your public officials around lobbying for some of these allocations. So what's this timeline look like? 22 months. I know it sounds like a lot, but I promise it'll happen quicker than you think. It's already happening quicker than everyone kind of expected. So we're at the end of 2022 here. Surprise, surprise. Our open house today launching the program is September 20th. We'll launch this application. We hope to close it October 11th. That's what we've set as a deadline for this. So please start having the conversations in the food system groups that you guys are working with in community. Think about some potential applications you guys would like to submit, some projects you're already working on that you'd like to see local allocations go to, and get your applications over to our team for us to review so we can select those 9 groups. On November 1st, we plan to announce the cohort. And then December 13th, we'll move pretty quickly. We'll convene these 9 groups for an orientation. Susie will expound more on those ARPA local dollars, what type of allocations they can go to, and then the goals and timelines of this project. So looking forward to 2023 is when a lot of the meat and potatoes of the work will start to happen. A lot of local governments will start their budget cycles in January. So you'll see these conversations start to take place at a local level, what your local county and municipalities are going to do with the remaining ARPA dollars. We'll start some training in January around engaging your local electeds around that local budget process. Through February, March, April, we'll do some strategic advocacy planning, some individual coaching, and that all leads up to June, July, where locales, both at the municipal level and the county level, will be passing their budgets. So we hope in year 1 to have some wins at the local level and have some of these allocation dollars begin to make it into the food system projects you guys are working on. That's year 1 through to June to July, that budget cycle. And then we'll start over again. As Susie stated, these allocations, we have 2 years. So what we don't get the first year, we'll get a second chance at going into the 2023-2024 fiscal year. So there'll be some more coaching, some more campaign assistance, some more cohort assistance with the 9 groups that are engaging here. So that's what 2022 and 2023 will look like through this project. And then we'll close out at the end of July 2024 with the closing of these ARPA allocations. So what does being a participant of this program entail? What kind of support are we providing as a team, Community Food Strategies, Budget Tax Center, and the Rural Center? So food councils and community groups selected to participate will receive $5,500 the first year of participation. This is to support any campaign related activities, community events, outreach, engagement, campaign materials, pretty broad application here with the dollars going into the actual group itself. And then we're hoping to have 2 representatives of each group, each project to engage in the work. Both representatives of that project will receive a $1,250 stipend per year for both years. So we're supporting both the groups and the individuals that are engaging in this program. So who can qualify? We'll send all this out in a follow-up email, but real quickly, again, food councils that are already engaging with community food strategies team, food councils that aren't currently engaging with community food strategies team are also eligible. And then community groups, this could be nonprofits, food hubs, faith groups, anyone engaging as a community group working in the food system space, local community networks, partnerships, organizations in North Carolina, as long as you're already doing health and food equity related issues and have a priority there. You do have to have a 501c3 fiscal partner to receive these funds. So if you're a community group that doesn't have that status, you may want to look to another group in your community to partner with, so we can have that fiscal agent there. Food councils and community groups must have identified a health equity focus related project. So some of the projects Jared spoke on, review the documents we sent out from the Association of County Commissioners of what's eligible, begin thinking about some projects that fit this health equity focused food system projects. Applicants must be willing to engage in a short interview process. I promise it won't be too detailed, too intensive, short interview and application process. Let's see here. We do want to identify 2 members from each group to identify and participate in this process for 2 years. And again, there will be a stipend tied to those 2 representatives that are participating there. We're encouraging multiracial teams to add some diversity and equity to these projects and programs we're exploring. Member representatives must attend at least 1 in-person meeting per year. So we do plan to convene these cohorts at some point in the year. We haven't outlined these dates yet for our in-person gathering, but you must be willing to attend 1 in-person meeting per year. And then members must have a desire to engage with this project through to July 2024. Again, what we don't accomplish this first year, we do hope to see through to 2024 and the end of that budget cycle next year. So that's quick eligibility. I know that was a lot. This is a new program. We're pretty optimistic that we'll be able to get some wins, and we know you guys have your eyes and ears on the ground. So yeah, we'll open it up to questions. Anything you guys may have. Jared, Susie, anything I missed, feel free to jump in.
Miles, that was all. I might add some real quick, Miles, because that was great. It's a lot of information. We know y'all have questions, but we want to clarify too that we know we designed this timeline around set budget processes. We know that some of these ARPA dollars aren't being given out around those same timelines, but we want to create this learning opportunity so that folks get used to working with municipalities and counties around these timelines that will move forward outside this ARPA reality. So that's why we created that timeline, and then we're going to be working with you all individually, depending on what you all find out about is the timeline in your communities. So that's just kind of the setup. And we also know that like some of you may have some wins in the first year and maybe want to continue on with different priorities or maybe not. Some of you may not have wins the first year. Some of you may have wins in the second year. So we know that that's going to be kind of a fluid and ongoing situation, but we want full participation throughout that whole 22 months. So you can at least learn and share what you maybe learned throughout your successful campaign that first year as part of that process. So, all right, well, cool. Let's open it up for questions. And so we'd love to document this. So if you can't put questions in the chat, we're recording obviously, but if you put questions in the chat, it'd be really helpful. We may stop recording so we can just answer questions freely. I forget what we decided to do there, Susie. What did we decide to do there, y'all? Keep it recording.
I think we decided to stop recording and document the questions.
We're gonna do that then. All right, I'm gonna stop recording and then we will